Hello and welcome to the latest Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce Q&A. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Amy Burton, who's a tax director at RSM. And what we're going to get into today is making R&D tax credits simple, getting under the skin of these and explaining, how and why you can benefit and why you should be. So Amy, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So R&D tax credits, set the scene. Give us a little bit of background around what this actually is and the role that you play in helping businesses to understand them more at RSM.
Yeah, absolutely. So as it says on the tin, R&D tax credits are a form of tax credits for businesses that are undertaking R&D activity. It's available to businesses of all sizes, so from the largest PLC right down to the smallest startup company. It's also available to businesses in all sectors, so we see claims in manufacturing, construction, IT, transport, food and drink, agriculture, almost anything you can think of. What really interests me about R&D tax credits is that it's one of the most generous forms of tax relief that's available, and it's applicable both to profit-making businesses and loss-making businesses. So where you've got those startup companies that might be investing a lot of money in their early years, this is still very relevant to them. So if I think about the value of R&D tax credits for businesses, that can range, depending on company size and tax profile, between 10 pence in the pound for every pound they're spending on R&D, up to 25 pence for every pound they're spending on R&D. Wow. So if you're a startup company investing heavily in R&D, for every pound that you're spending, the government can effectively be subsidising that.
And one of the things that's always struck me is how businesses or business sort of leaders may think, oh, it won't apply to us. R&D, we're not doing R&D. We haven't got people in white coats in a lab designing and the like. It always makes me think of is it Q in James Bond? But actually, it's far broader, isn't it? What actually would be classified as research and development and eligible for the tax credits. Just give us some examples maybe of the sorts of things that businesses are doing that they may not even realize would qualify.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly right, Paul. Businesses can have in mind that this is only for brand new inventions, and that's not the case at all. It's for anything that's achieving an advance in science or technology. So it's taking something that's the current baseline of technology and then taking that further, and that's in any particular field of technology or science. So an example of a client that I've worked with for several years is in the lighting industry. Mm-hmm. So if we think about the classic light bulb, you might think that's been around for years, decades, centuries, maybe.
Couple 100 years,
yeah. So you might think there's no R&D there, but I've worked on claims with them where they've been moving towards LED technology, making lights more energy efficient, but also keeping the brightness of those lights as high as possible. They've even more recently looked into smart lighting technology. So this is just an example of where you've got something that's existing technology, but they're continuously taking it to that next level. And if I think about that last point I said there, smart lighting, you might think the internet and wireless technology is very well known. It's that's also been around for a while now, but what they're doing here is applying it to a new field in terms of smart lighting. So that's equally applicable.
Yeah, so it's sort of product development, really, isn't it? And it's worth exploring. So if you're a business and you've been and you're not sure, is that the sort of support and service that yourself and the team at RSM can advise on and sort of say, yes, this would qualify, that wouldn't? Or how easy is it to sort of self-assess if you
Yeah,
like.
I think that there's often a misconception here as well that R&D tax credits are difficult to achieve, that it's a complex process or a costly process, and that doesn't have to be the case. There's a number of very good advisors out there, RSM being one of them, and we're happy to have a conversation with any business around what they're doing, not necessarily just new product development. It could be more intangible outputs of R&D, things like process efficiencies or improvements.
Yeah.
At RSM, we've got a number of people that are specialists in R&D tax credits, so that's all they're doing, or the majority of what they're doing, and they're not necessarily from an accounting or a finance background. So we've got people with IT and software backgrounds, so they understand what's happening in that sector, what technology that is, and they're able then to really pinpoint where those R&D opportunities are.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned off camera before the chamber, we went through this process ourselves just on a new CRM system that we implemented that I would not have thought would have qualified, but actually process improvement and did. And so, there's cost that you're making to your business, but actually, is eligible under the scheme, and rightly so. And,
yeah.
If you don't claim it, the money, doesn't get to you. And I think that that's one of the big calls that we have for businesses, is to make sure that you're getting a bit of advice and looking at what you've maybe been have already done over the recent sort of time, and would that qualify, and can you get that help and support? I mean, if someone reaches out to you, Amy, or the team, I mean, what's the time frames involved? How long does it take to make the assessment and to sort of put the application in, and ultimately, I guess, for the money and the credits to sort of flow?
That's a good question. The assessment itself can be done quite quickly. What I'd always advise here is these kind of things, being tax credits, often end up led by a finance department, FD, etc. The best person for someone like myself to have a conversation with is a chief technology officer, an engineer, someone that's involved in these R&D projects, someone that's seeing the work that's being done and understands what competitors might be doing, what else is available in the marketplace. Right. If I can have a conversation with someone like that in the business, normally within an hour or two's conversation, we can see if there's a valuable claim there or not. Then it's a case of working with the finance team to put the costs to that R&D activity and that project. A full claim can be done within 2 months. Depending on size, it might be up to, say, 6 months. Once that's been submitted to HMRC, it gets submitted as part of the tax return itself. HMRC have got a policy of trying to turn these round and make the repayments within a month.
Right.
And even during the COVID period this year, 2020, they have been sticking to that, and we've seen businesses receiving their cash in a good, timely manner.
Yeah, which sort of now more important than ever, and as people are starting to plan. And how far back can you look at activity and make a claim? So if you've done something, say, 2 or 3 years ago, and you're just watching this now and going, well, that would have qualified if only we'd known. I mean, what's the time period?
There's a 2-year time window, and that's from the end of the relevant financial accounting period. So, for example, if we're talking about a 31 December 2020 year end, you've got until 31 December 2022 to file that. So if anyone did any R&D within the year to December 2018, they need to be thinking about that one quite quickly now.
Give you a call as soon as possible, eh? And I mean, in your experience, I mean, why do more businesses not claim? Is it just a lack of knowledge and understanding, or are there other obstacles that you see on a sort of regular basis?
I'd say there's 2 main ones. Firstly is an awareness that these tax credits are out there and that they're available to them. So this is part of me being here today to try and raise that awareness and make as many businesses as possible know that it's out there and available to them. And secondly, there's those misunderstandings around how difficult it is to claim, how costly it might be, what's in scope, what's not in scope. And that's where I'd really recommend just having a conversation with someone. Most professionals will have an introductory conversation, 20 minutes free of charge, just to see if there's any opportunity there. And at least then the business can be satisfied that they've either considered it and it's not relevant, or great, there's a cash opportunity here, let's move forward.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a sort of call that we'd be making to businesses at the best of times. Why wouldn't they look at this? The credits are there to help stimulate and drive, research and innovation. But, in the 8 months into the COVID pandemic, it feels like such a great potential opportunity as businesses are looking for ways of just managing through this, to be completely thorough, isn't it? And really make sure that they're going back and reviewing what has been done. They're not missing any opportunities, or if they're sat there right now thinking about still potentially making that investment, then this might be a calculation which can help them to push ahead with that, and a little bit get ahead of the curve as we start to think about turning the calendar into next year, and what we know is going to be a strong recovery. You want to make sure that if you can invest, you are, and tax credits could help. It seems like a timely moment, doesn't it, really?
I know, absolutely. And in a year such as this, with the struggles that businesses have had, why would anyone turn down some cash from the government or a tax refund? I know most of my clients really enjoy receiving cash back from HMRC, perhaps more than anyone else.
It may be the greatest letter you ever get. And I mean, Amy, just sorry, you're going to...
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's particularly relevant in a year like this as well, because businesses have spent time and effort thinking about how to run their businesses slightly different in a COVID secure way. So perhaps businesses have looked at manufacturing methodologies to make sure they're socially distanced. They might have invested in IT systems to allow for working from home or for online ordering. Perhaps they've looked at cutting costs in products to increase profitability, or reduce waste, scrap, things like that. A lot of these costs that they might have incurred this year anyway might be eligible if they fit within the categories.
It's a great point. And kind of underlines, why even more so that chances are that businesses have been pivoting and adapting. That they're probably will qualify. There's a good chance anyway, and certainly worth looking at and exploring. And I was just going to sort of ask, to wrap up. I mean, what do you see the future being with R&D tax credits? Is there a roadmap as to future changes to the scheme, or are they likely to expand it or shrink it? What's any sort of idea on that?
Yeah, so we had a budget back in March this year where the government set out its R&D roadmap for the year. That's wider than just R&D tax credits, but it did say that it wants to get spending on R&D up to, I think, around 2.5% of GDP. They've committed to around, I'm just going to check it on my notes here because I want to get the exact number, 22 billion of support to businesses carrying out R&D in the UK by 2025. And these R&D tax credits are one of the key mechanisms by which they get that cash back to the businesses carrying out the R&D. So they're not going to go away, and we could see them continuing to increase in value. In April this year, the scheme for large businesses increased in rate. It went from 12% up to 13%. So that's something we can keep an eye on for future. And HMRC have just been undertaking a consultation regarding the qualifying costs. So we've got a set list of costs that qualify for this tax relief at the moment, and they're trying to increase some new categories into that. And what they're looking at in particular is spend on data and cloud computing, because they see those as two key areas where businesses are now undertaking more R&D, and we hear the saying, data is king now.
Yeah.
So they're just trying to keep R&D tax credits relevant to the modern world and modern ways of undertaking R&D.
No, that's really informative, Amy, and I hope people watching you kind of, as you said, these are some of the most generous form of tax relief that is out there. There's a commitment from government. There's opportunities there. The criteria is actually widening and is probably even more relevant to more businesses now who've dealt with and are dealing with the pandemic than ever before. So I think the message here is, if you're not sure, then reach out to an advisor and find out. Don't let this sort of pass you by. It's such a great opportunity, as we sort of said, to get some well-deserved cash back from government to your business for some innovative research and development that you've done. And I know that if people want to reach out to yourself or your team, Amy, they can certainly do so through the chamber. There's a ton of information as well on the RSM website. But any other sort of final parting thoughts from yourself, or sort of messages around reaching out for those who want to find out more?
I think you've summed it up great there, Paul. I'm very happy to have a conversation with any business that's interested. And my main summary point would just be, don't discount it too early. Just have a conversation so that you're confident that you've made the right choice.
Great. Amy, it's really useful. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Paul. Bye-bye.